Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Training Industry Leader Talk, Building Digital Fluency Across the Workforce. This is sponsored by ELB Learning, Disruptive Spark, and Training Industry Courses. My name is Emma. I'm a marketing associate here at Training Industry, and I'm so excited to have you here with us today for this session. But before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping items to go over to help you interact with our speaker and get the most out of today's program. So throughout the event today, looks like a lot of you are already doing it. Please feel free to use the chat for comments and submit your questions in the Q&A panel. We'll address those questions during the session, and we will save some time at the end of the event to answer them then as well. When this session ends, a survey will pop open in your browser, so please take a minute to share your feedback on the session and the speaker. And as always, all of our sessions are being recorded and will be archived on trainingindustry.com. And all of you will receive a follow-up email at the end of the day with all of the recordings and links to the PowerPoints. If this is your first Training Industry event, we'd like to welcome you. Training Industry exists to make connections among learning and development professionals. We offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D through live events like today's Leader Talk, as well as through the articles on our website, in our magazine. We have conferences, research reports, our podcast, and more. So if you'd like to explore more at Training Industry, just visit trainingindustry.com. And of course, we'd love to hear about what you've learned from the session on social media, so follow us on your favorite platform so we can continue the conversation there. And now, without any further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our speaker, David Mantica, Managing Director at SoftEd. It's great to have you here, David.
Thank you so much, Emma. It's great to be here. I'm going ahead and pop my slides up here. So as we are saying, we like to talk. We like to chat. We like to be interrupted. So please don't hesitate to interrupt. I see lots of Copilot users. I see some paid ChatGTP users, which is great. Please do not hesitate to share experiences, any issues you might be having, concerns with those tools as well. Remember, this is going to be a curriculum conversation, but that doesn't preclude us from talking about the tools, tool capabilities. I have a great deal of experience. I got involved in the GenAI space in 2003, February. And before that, I did a lot of IoT stuff in 2017, 18, and 19. I actually knew about NVIDIA right before the pop happened. I bought a little bit of stock there, and my little bit of stock, teeny bit, has grown 3,200%. So interesting. I wish I was a little bit more aggressive, but so I've been involved in the space quite a bit, know a lot about it. So I'll be happy to share additional questions. When we look at this curriculum map that we're talking about today, this has been used a number of times already. So this is practical use based on experience, and some of the experience has been challenging. Some of the experience has been decent. So I'm going to show you some of those things and share with you some of those challenges and talk through, what you can do in your curriculum mapping. Like 20 individuals are using the innovation lab concept is really cool. So before we get started on the curriculum side, we have, as L&D professionals, training professionals, we have to get this point across. This is a tool that makes a quality person more and more and more productive. It does not make somebody who doesn't know anything magically be able to do something. And that point, you might think, oh, I know that. That point just isn't out there right now. We got to reinforce that point. This is a tool. And here's the thing. I could teach somebody PowerPoint who knows nothing about being a lawyer, and that person can build slides for those lawyers, right? But I can't take somebody who knows nothing about the law and give them GenAI and tell them to do stuff for the lawyers. Not possible. Not possible. So that's why there are similarities in the early 90s with the rollout of the Microsoft Productivity Suite, Word, PowerPoint, Excel. Then you got started getting a little bit into some of the more heavier tools, like, the SQL tools and the databasing tools. Access, that's right. It got my head there. You could do some of those things without knowing the work you're doing on. You can't successfully use these generative tools without first being an expert or at least skilled in the work that you're doing. So this is important. The other important takeaway as you start building your curriculum And man, this is crazy nuts. Everybody uses it differently. Everybody uses it differently. And that's part of the challenge in the curriculum development side. It's tough to get scale. You can do it, and we're going to talk about how you can get that scale, but it's tough to get scale. The other critical piece as you're building your curriculum stacks is the criticality, and use critical and criticality twice here. This is pretty fun, right? Of use cases. The training you do, especially at level 3 and level 4, even level 2, is extremely use case driven. So we got to know what the use case is. People are starting to use this term all the time now. Back in the early 2000s, use case was really the word for business analyst. Now it's a word for all of us as we work towards figuring out how to help people do their work better. So a use case is a specific task, a thing that you do, a thing that the worker does that's tied specific to their role. When they start using GenAI, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to start trying to mimic that work in a GenAI environment to hope to get productivity gains. They're not going to start doing things different or creative. First, they're going to mimic. Then, as they practice and mimic and start to grow in their capabilities, then they'll start seeing the other stuff they can do. So this is a lot of kind of the mentored learning area that you're going to have to consider too going forward. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And as you can see from my reinforcement, everyone uses it differently. You have 2 marketers. I'm going to train them specifically on skills and skills related to their area, but they are going to spread out. They're going to branch out and begin doing different things with it. In a lot of cases, you don't want to train on that. You want to make sure that they have the empowerment to explore. And that's when we'll get into this concept of a promptathon going on right now. And again, if you have questions, comments, thoughts, I'm looking at the chat right here. I see it. I'd be happy to answer any of those things as you throw them out. Very happy to answer those things. So we'll talk about that concept of the promptathon. So the criticality use cases. If I'm doing GenAI training, if I'm doing tool training associated with GenAI, there has to be an element of use cases, and those use cases have to be related to the job role and job function to get the maximum return, the maximum value out of that use of those tools. Hope that makes sense. Now let's keep moving. So the agenda today, I got you for 45 minutes. We're already down by 7. So these are the great things we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about planning models. So what are the different planning models out there? There's a couple, and you can use those planning models. I'm going to reinforce the use of policy in your training. Then we're going to talk about the layer 1 of this is the executive sessions. What are some of the elements that a good executive session for GenAI training has? What you should be thinking about? I've done about 10 executive sessions so far, and there's a lot of pros and cons and things you got to look for in those sessions. Then we're going to talk about corporate use training. One of you talked about having 150 people using right now. That's phenomenal. And there are ways to do some corporate use training to just get them started. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be specific use case driven, but we're going to talk about the fact that it can be generic use case driven. Specific, generic. There are generic use cases of these tools that we all do that we can use these tools for regardless of our role. Then, of course, the power comes in merging those into the stuff that we do specific for our job. Then we'll talk about the role-based training. That's the power. Training industry has 2 phenomenal role-based training classes for the L&D professionals. We'll talk about what the role-based training is, how you do it, the power associated with it. Then we're going to get into the future. And this is something you have to have on your maps, and you have to have it there because it's going to be 2006, 2007 is really going to be the years of agentics. An agentic build out. And you're going to be hearing that agentic word more and more. You might have heard the open cloth conversations about the personal agentic tools or the Copilot conversation from Anthropic, which is another personal agentic tool. But you probably in your larger corporations are going to hear more about enterprise agentic tools. And this is where IT starts to get more involved. But for phase 1, 2, and 3, you'll see that IT should be part of it, but it's not mandatory to empower people because IT just has to turn a couple buttons on. It's based on the policy, then the execution, and getting those licenses out there. When you get into agentics, that's when that's when IT becomes more important in the process because it's a stack. It becomes agentics almost becomes a software project in a lot of cases. So the models, planning models, the role of policy. We'll get into executive sessions, the corporate use training. Love corporate use training. Love it. Done probably 50 sessions plus of corporate use training. Role-based training, and I do some of that, but that goes beyond my skill set. That we have to have real experts that can do those jobs doing that. And then certainly you have those experts in your company, all your domain experts. So then ultimately automation and agentics. And as I start moving forward, one interesting thing for you to know. I built these slides using Claude. Then the Claude deck was put into, God, my brain just flipped out. Oh, not Gloss, Gamma. Thank you, Michelle. Gamma. And then Gamma output the quality slides you see now. Thank you so much, Michelle. So it's interesting. I didn't want to use Gamma because I felt more comfortable in Claude. So I worked the Claude action and I built it off of our slide template. Then once it got to the point where I thought it was good, my marketing team looked at it and said, yeah, we're going to fix this up. And then they ran it through Gamma. So planning, start of level 1 is planning. As you're looking at creating your executive sessions, you have to think about a planning model. And what we talk about in this planning model is 4 elements, and that's not ethical considerations. That's part of human factors. This is a mistake in the slides that couldn't get fixed. It's technical considerations. So this one on the bottom left is technical considerations. So when I start in the executive session, I'm sitting down going, okay, let's talk about outcomes, personal productivity, increased productivity for the company, new solutions. Are you just trying to get efficiencies through layoffs, which a lot of companies are doing? And we want to bring those tools in to increase productivity, which would then increase profits. Are we looking for new business opportunities? Are we looking to test things quicker and more effectively? What are we trying to do? What are our outcomes? Then as we start looking at the outcomes, we're going to start looking at specific use cases. Okay, if we're going to make some changes in marketing, what are some of the specific use cases in marketing that we think we can start looking at more deeply? What are some of the specific use cases in accounting? What are some of the specific use cases in training? Yeah, I'm sorry, Malin, to hear that. I know it's really tough right now. At the same time, you can start helping staff build a portfolio of skills in this space that they can showcase and utilize for greater productivity. There will be job growth here. It's going to happen when the agentics engine starts. And you're going to see that job growth in a lot of people doing analysis and process modeling and requirements gathering to fine tune the processes that the agentic system is going to automate. So you will see job growth. Right now, we're still in the phase of personal productivity tools and those tools happening in the role-based area and companies seeing the opportunity to go from 5 people doing the job to 2 people doing the job. That will happen first, and it's happening, but there will be a second wave. From there, you do have to consider your technical. Okay, what are we willing to turn on? What are we willing to pay for? What are we willing to put out there from a privacy standpoint? What type of information? This will help you ultimately start building your policy in a lot of cases. And then finally, you do have to have a communication strategy around the human factors. Your employees are nervous. They see it as a replacement. We have to start pushing the fact that it's an augmentation. It's a co-intelligence. So as you start building this curriculum out, you're really focusing around that augmentation, that co-intelligence piece. So now as you build this model out more, you start talking through the interconnections. And at the very center is that literacy. And I'm not just talking about using the tool. I'm a big believer in understanding the foundational knowledge which makes that tool happen. I want people to understand how AI actually works, the predictive element, not to the point of being able to write the algorithm, but to understand that it predicts at the syllable level. I want people to understand that there's a token tied to that and there's a cost associated with that. I want people to understand the different tool sets and how they operate. I would like them to understand the derivative nature of how this thing produces information. It doesn't create, it's derivative, it's predictive. It's not a consciousness. It might look like a consciousness. It's not a consciousness. It's a highly sophisticated predictive technology. And then what it can answer and what it can't answer. So you're looking at some of your challenges here, and you're looking at your training, and then you're tying that back to, okay, if I have to train in the use cases area, what are the use cases? Yes, it's a Google replacement. So exactly, got to start. You start with, if you're just using this shelf, that's part of your training. Is you at the literacy level when you're doing your corporate use training, is you begin to show them the magic. Then when you get into the role-based training, you show them the power. Magic, then power. And the human factors is part of your challenge. As you're tying HR, you've got to continue to communicate the idea that they're going to build long-lasting skills. They can build a portfolio of capabilities. They're going to be able to add so much value. And ultimately, you're going to touch your customer better. What you want to be thinking about here is adding in the agile concept of delighting your customers. I'm going to be able to delight my customers more because I'm going to be able to test new services and capabilities faster and more effectively to go to market face to face with something you actually want at a higher speed level. Now, that's where companies should start going to. Because as a big company person, you got to look at this VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity thing. You got to say to yourself, how come we can't compete with these upstarts? You know, a company used to last on the Fortune 500 in the 60s, 30s, 40 years. Now, a company barely lasts 12 years on the Fortune 500 when they get there. So these AI tools can help you compete against these shooting stars because it helps you adjust, pivot, and change accordingly. That's going to happen over time because we have to change mindsets. Then, as you're looking at your plan, you can get a bigger map of it and you can start putting it into the buckets. For me, training goes across all of these elements. And you'll see that in the plan I laid out. But ultimately, you can start seeing, all right, what are my technical issues that we need to be talking about? What are my policy governance issues I need to be talking about? What are my business capabilities I need to be talking about? And my levels of training. And you can kind of see when you get into this that my levels of training here on the left-hand side will tie into the map that I'm looking at. So if you have a couple models that you can communicate through, that's ultimately what you're going to take to the executive session along with your policy, or at least the start of the policy. Now, let me tell you, if you let a lawyer touch the policy, it's going to be a debacle. It's basically, he's going to say, nobody can do anything, anytime, anywhere, don't touch it. So I was lucky enough in early 2003 to work with a company I was with to develop policy. And it started with a 12-page document the lawyers got their dirty hands on. But we were able to, lawyers are great, don't get me wrong, but we were able to get it down to 2 pages. And that 2 pages be able to spawn the programmatic push out of the technology into the organization. So policies are important because in bigger companies, people expect guardrails. And until I have those guardrails, I'm not going to feel psychologically safe to actually do anything. A lack of a policy will provide paralysis to your rollout. It will slow it down. It'll almost stop it completely because of the fear of not knowing what they can or can't do. You're going to get a few upstarts. Make the policy visible to everybody. Include the policy in the corporate rollout training. Reference the policy in the role-based training. Remember the policy as you get more technical. Policy is going to be a living document. Just built one for one of my clients just recently. It was great. Guess what? I used AI to build it. It built me the policy. I looked through it. I tied changes in the policy based on my client. I analyzed that, gave it to the client, asked the client to look through it based on their ethics, what they want to do, the costs they want to handle, and then we rolled it out at the company junket back in February. So you want it to appear everywhere. You want to talk about the approved tools, and you want to point to the federal laws. Right now, there is very limited federal regulation outside of copyright ownership. And you want to spell out clear consequences for misuse, especially around what type of information you allow them to work with. Can you move without a policy? You can, but you risk slowing down the rollout because you want this to start out in a multiplication effect. Because this is a product. This is an internal product. This is an internal capability. And it operates across the same curves that any external product manager knows. Your first movers, your middle movers, and then your late people. And, the first movers may be a big pop, but those first movers dictate whether the middle people move. And then even the laggers are looking at the first movers deciding if they're going to do anything or not. Exactly. And I like that, Marilyn. I think, there are issues. There are going to be guardrails that you have to do. But you know what? In bigger corporations, guardrails let people get more comfortable with what they're going to operate within. And the policy can start in L&D, then get tied into your HR manager. Then the HR leadership can bring it to legal. Then you can bring it to your executive sessions. I truly believe that you've got to start here. And I understand that companies can't for a lot of reasons. I know a lot of you, we're never going to touch the C-suite, but executive in big companies are director level. You could do executive sections for your director level department leads. So it should only be a half day because it's going to be intense. In person is so much better. I got to see the body language. There's going to be some level of negotiation between different partner heads in that partner department heads in there. We want to follow the model we talked about. So we're going to be talking about the functional issues, but we also have to bring out the budgetary issues. We talked about 150 licenses, right? There is a big cost to those 150 licenses. Do you know that folks are talking about now that if a software development group uses Claude for all its coding, there's a possibility that engineer will rack up $100,000 plus of extra token costs. Say, what? Well, your executives better understand what tokens are. They better understand how different tools calculate those tokens. So they're not getting bills. And these same bills happened during the cloud days. When cloud first started, it was a lot more expensive. And you get these crazy bills coming out of AWS or coming out of Azure. About 3 years ago, I got a crazy Azure bill because someone hacked our system and used our cloud environment to do a Trojan attack. The bill was catastrophic. Now, they worked with us on it, but know that in most cases, these are real costs because there's real energy issues associated with using these technologies. The same token as if your company, as you're doing your executive session, you might want to start trying to do some internal LLM, large language model development. Can't minimize the budgetary costs of the energy that is needed to manage that over the long term. You do want to start talking about your curriculum. You're going to formulate that strategic plan. So here's the skinny. You want to do it, IT needs to be in the room. But initially at the personal productivity side, the individual worker productivity side, it's not an IT issue. IT just needs to turn some things on and turn some things off. Now, IT is going to have some corporate-wide projects. Most of them are going to be agentic-based. Initially, the corporate-wide projects were large language model-based. Now, a lot of these corporate projects are going to be agentic-based, but they're separate from this type of rollout. And you really need to have your tooling down pat. And a lot of you are going to default to Copilot, but I really highly suggest that you have some folks helping you with that decision, and maybe you have a two-tool strategy. I can show you an image that I created with a tool of Claude and the same image I created with ChatGTP, and it was crazy. Claude is amazing at a lot of things, but it is not good at images. Woo, baby. So, corporate use training. You run your executive session. All right, you got your tooling down, you got your policy down. I really see two elements. I see an e-learning element, and then I see a live virtual hands-on element. With the e-learning element, that's going into all the things I talked about, and you're going to see that here shortly in the slide. All the whether some of the privacy issues, whether some of the security issues, what is a token, how do tokens work, how does this predictive technology work? And a lot of times what the company will do will have somebody do that as a live webinar, record it, and allow people to access it at any time. Now, the live virtual sessions, this is where you get an understanding of the tools, and then you start going hands-on with generic use cases. How to write an email, how to do sentiment analysis in writing your email, how to work on a internal document to slice, dice, and pull information out of it, how to do basic analysis with the tools. You will have 4 or 5 different use cases. And remember, the use cases are probably going to be more tied to working with existing documents than actually creating things from scratch. Because the power in working with existing documents is amazing. In 2023, these tools could not do the work they do with its existing documents. The technology is called RAG. And RAG has become standard in all the tools for allowing you to put a document into your system and slice and dice it 1,000 different ways. So you're gonna have to really think through and work through what those generic use cases are. But one thing I wanted to share with you all is that I do believe in the criticality of this book. It's older now. It's 2024. That's the copyright. I don't know if he's come out April. I'm not sure if he came out with an update yet. But Ethan Mollick's 4 Laws, and this book is written for any knowledge professional to understand. If you have a college degree and you're doing knowledge work and you have some level of critical thinking skills, this book will help you understand your point of presence within the world of AI. And it's great. We're getting some great feedback here associated with the book, right? And what I like to do is I incorporate this into any of my corporate use training. Like I'm doing a corporate use training class session right after this. And this is in there. I tried to put this slide in there, but it didn't translate well into my other deck. So you want to try AI in anything you do. That's law 1. You will learn whether it does that well or not, as long as it fits the policy. The human in the loop has become the adage out there. Now people are adjusting and putting their little spin on the human in the loop, but ultimately, basically an output from AI is a piece of information. You have to, as a human, make decisions on that piece of information. It just doesn't go out. Some people also call this supervised AI back in the, not back in, but in machine learning AI, it's called supervised AI. You want to engage it as another human being, and then you got to talk through what that other human being should be doing, at what level they're acting and how are they acting. And this is the big one. Just because a tool didn't do something 3 months ago doesn't mean the tool isn't going to do something better now. That number 4, that you're consistently working with the worst tools. And this is really important because that's why I jump between tools as they get better. They do things better. And this is part of the practicum. This is where, and I didn't include this in this deck, but this is where an AI center of excellence could really be powerful to basically curate and bring in information based on the tooling that you do and keep people updated on capabilities. So on the e-learning side, these are some of the elements I would definitely include in the e-learning side. The fundamentals around the predictive, how the predictive works, the tokenization, how tokenization works, the fact that it's derivative technology, the energy demands, the copyright setting, the privacy concerns. I'm going to show you a couple cool slides right now tied to this on the human versus AI strength. And then, of course, you're going to have some prompting. You're going to have a lot of prompting. And then when they do their hands-on, it's going to be prompting. There are probably 20 plus prompting strategies out there right now. The key thing with prompting strategies is each person's going to ultimately develop a style, but people have to understand that it only gets specific if you get specific. If you want to create an image and you say create an image of an old dude like David that in this picture, it's going to be pretty pathetic. I work with an AI for video guy and an AI for image guy. Yes, great, Marilyn. That's great. The prompting side, you can include that in your corporate training. You can say, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do hands-on, then we're going to do some prompt skill development. You could do that in 4 hours. Then you might want to reinforce that through some additional prompting information, or you can do what's called a promptathon. So that's the slide I tried to do in Claude, and I wish I could show you what it produced because it was really bad. I didn't check the spelling out, but when you produced images in ChatGPT paid, the spelling was pathetic. The spelling was pathetic. Yeah, you got to look at fingers too for sure, but this gets the point across, right? A promptathon is when each area is working and testing and trying out new things, and you set it up as a competition. Depending on what output you're looking for, depending on what type of quality output you're looking at, this is practice, 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 practice. Yeah, it's gotten better though, Marilyn. If you look, I don't believe there's any spelling mistakes here. And that is the first time I've done an image in ChatGPT immediately. Now, Manus does better images. Nana Banana through Gemini does better images. But I'm still an old school, going to go to put it in the ChatGPT because it's got Sora in it. And it's got the old, I forgot what the old engine generating tool was that was separate before they rolled it in. Dolly, I think it was. I can't remember. Anyways, Promptathon should be, yeah, it can be bad sometimes, should be a part of that level 2 corporate training. Now, this is the explosion. The explosion begins when you start digging deeper and looking at it by role, by role, by role. You bring into VP of marketing, you say, okay, let's look at some specific use cases. All right, let's bring a team and we're going to do a use case session. 45, half a day, 3/4 of the day, and we're going to develop and look at the multiple use cases that would be relevant. Then we're going to document those use cases and we're going to roll them up into role-based, hands-on training for marketing. You can find public classes on AI for project management, for business development, for business analysis, for marketers, for sales. And all of those are good, but yet they're not, the use cases are generically specific for the role. You can bring that vendor in and then let them adjust their use cases to fit the more specific use cases that you have, or you can do this yourself. This is 3 half days of training, 4 half days of training. And the output should be outputs that they can go back and begin to use day in and day out. For instance, training industry has the AI for L&D program, which is a role-based program that should be given after someone understands AI, understands all the implications of it, and they're going in, they're using some specific tooling to then do L&D type work. And then from there, you're going to take that information you did and you're going to build it out within your L&D practice. This starts the curiosity. This gets the learning going. This gets them fired up. You don't necessarily have to use your specific tool because it's prompting. Everything, whether it's Gemini, whether it's ChatGPT, Claude, whatever the case may be, the prompting is the power. Now, what comes out is tied back to how well the algorithms are, but prompting is agnostic to tooling. Unless you start getting really, really, really fixated on a large language model and how to work with it, prompting is agnostic to tooling. But certainly role-based training to get the most productivity pop is going to be associated with using your tool. But this doesn't happen if you don't do the corporate training. They don't understand. This doesn't happen if you haven't had executive sessions because they don't know the strategies. They don't know the connector. You can do it, but they're going to be somewhat lost. When you do the role-based training, I want to remind you that you want to focus initially on the elements that they currently have available to them. Right now, because of the blowout of the protocol, the technology capability called RAG, man, you could do so much with existing documentation. You can take a document, you can look at it and identify core elements. You can summarize information. You can organize the information. I just did a session on a SWOT session. I did stickies. I took the pictures of the stickies. I took those pictures, put them into Claude. Claude read the pictures. Claude began organize the SWOT analysis for me. Then I asked it to analyze the SWOT analysis across sentiment, feelings, adjustments. This is just one slide. There's 6. What we look at in our practice is there's like 8, excuse me, like 6. There are 12 really interesting things at the role-based level that AI can do using existing information. Now, this then starts to plant the seed for agentic automation. As you get better and better at working with existing information, agentics is basically the automation of systems working with existing information that has to make decisions at certain points in that process flow. That's all I'm going to say about it there. I don't want to get into all the other elements associated with it. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Emma, for the heads up on the time check, because I do get babbly sometimes. Another great slide that you can actually use in layer 2 or layer 3 is just giving them a snapshot. Co-intelligence works because when you analyze how large language models operate and how AI operates compared to how humans operate, there's very little positive overlap. We augment each other's capabilities. The one thing I love about AI is it just can look at so much information and find things I would have never seen within those information pools, especially around product, because most of us product people know that, the reasons we think people are going to buy a product are not why people buy the product ultimately. As much as you could put Steve Jobs on the guru on the mountain, people go back and say what he thought they were going to buy the iPhone for was not what people bought it for. So this begins to showcase folks and start saying, okay, yeah, my strength is here. So how can I augment that with my weakness over there? How can I pull those two things together? Again, I want people thinking before they act. I want people knowing before they get into the tool itself. Ultimately, when you get into the agentic side, it's going to be a technology first play. Are you using an Azure stack? Are you using a Google stack? Are you using an OpenAI stack? Are you using which one did I miss? AWS stack. Training is about using the agentic system. So in most cases, it's going to be tied to some developers, coders, and power users. We want to understand how the agentic system works and begin practicing basic automations. Some of your workers might have moved into using tools like Opal or using tools like Cowork, Claude Cowork. Claude Cowork is a light agentic system for personal productivity. But there are issues there that IT needs to be involved with. Like OpenClaw is a very bad thing in large corporate environments without IT. Ultimately, too, this layer 4 is something you're going to be going towards in the future. You're going to be working with IT, but ultimately it's something you're going to add not just in large-scale IT projects, but it's also going to be something you're going to be doing in individual role-based training will morph into some more agentic training over time. You'll notice that nothing in this model talks about building private large language models. If you haven't read, so type in MIT State of IT report from the summer of 2025. It'll go through while many of those failed miserably because you don't know what you don't know yet. We're not ready to understand how to operationalize private large language models. Just type in MIT State of IT report. State of AI, sorry, MIT State of AI report into Google, and it will come up for you. It should be a date of either June or July 2025. And I'm sorry, I don't know it off the top of my head, but somebody with fast fingers out there can actually go ahead and do it. So here's the kind of the model. You got your great. You got your executive level sessions where your AI policy is critically important. Then you move into layer two where you have your e-learning about what it is. Then you have your hands-on related to generic use cases. By that time, you should have your tool choice going. Then you're getting into the power, the productivity pop. And that's your role-based, use case-driven, hands-on sessions by department group. Your tool set, they're rocking and rolling. You start doing promptathons to get them more and more practice, or just allow for practice sessions, or instead of promptathon, you set up a center of excellence. And then finally, once your technology gets stabilized and IT gets more involved, you're going to do corporate enterprise agentic projects, automating key functions within the organization, automating call center, automating call pickup, automating order entry, and then you're going to have productivity people, individual productivity people using it for power use and major productivity enhancement. So that's it. So we have a question associated with the junction of human machine collaboration. There are a ton of gray areas with this. What is your positioning regarding these issues of work ethics? And you have to have deep conversations early on associated with what you are going to allow and what you're not going to allow. And that's going to be company by company, culture by culture. And you got to be thinking about those things. Well, anyways, I got 3 minutes. Any questions, comments, thoughts? Yeah, you're going to work your champions. Absolutely. That's why this idea of the center of excellence, once you get to the layer 3, could become very valuable for you to utilize and utilize your champions. You're gonna, this potentially could spawn coaching just like the agile world. An AI transformation has a lot of similarities to some of the agile transformations in your IT groups that you saw. And Center of Excellence actually played a really good role in that. Hey, Emma, you want to put those last slides up real quick?
Yeah, let me pull that up.
And I'm here to answer any questions as she's rolling that up.
All right, so we wanted to share these two courses with you. They're on sale right now. You can save 10% on one or 15% on both. And these, David, you and SoftEd worked very closely with training industry on these courses.
Yeah, so basically, look at the AI adoption for workforce development is right around the pre-executive level, or if you've done your executive level session, you want to plan your rollout. So this is giving you much more detail around a couple of the slides that were in this deck or actually in that class that will help you start formulating some of your ultimate goals and strategies around how you're going to implement. Now, your AI essentials for L&D is hands-on, baby. It's rocking and rolling, using the tools to do L&D, doing some learning analysis, some content build, but we are going to build a class just for using AI for building content. This is more not leader, but manager skill set with some content side of it, but extremely hands-on to start increasing your productivity and adding more and more things that you can do to create value for the organization.
Awesome. Thanks so much, David. And both of these programs have been so popular with our audience. We have excellent participant feedback and they consistently sell out. So grab your seat now. I'm sure they'll be going quickly. All right, David, thank you again so much for this very insightful presentation. I know we all got a lot out of it. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm off. Appreciate you, Emma. Thank you so much.
See ya.
Bye.
All right, y'all, we are taking a 15-minute break. Up next, we have Susan and Cheryl for their session, Building AI Readiness, How L&D Leads Digital Fluency and Adoption, and that is sponsored by Disruptive Spark. I'm going to close this session, and you can join the next session by going back to the Zoom events lobby and clicking on it. Like I said, that will begin in 15 minutes. So I hope you all stick around for that next session, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day, all.